Yes, people, what's happening? Welcome back to Chelsea Fan TV and welcome to another video. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about Mason Mount and his contract situation. But before we get into it, make sure you smash the likes on this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and please leave your thoughts in the comments below, whether you agree or disagree with anything that I've said in this video. And whilst you're down there, feel free to also check out my personal channel, which is linked in the description. But let's get into it, guys. Mason Mount out of contract in summer 24, just under 18 months left on his contract. Negotiations have started for a new deal. We've seen that Todd Boehly is keen to tie down young talent to long-term deals. We've seen Armando Broja sign a 6+1. We've seen Reece James do the same as well. He's really keen to secure the futures of top talent on long-term deals so that we avoid situations of losing top players for free, which we've seen recently with obviously Rudiger and Christensen, and we may also see with Jorginho and Kante this coming summer. It was first reported a week or so back in The Athletic that Chelsea face having to pay Mason Mount £300,000 a week because he wants parity with the wages that Raheem Sterling is on. And, you know, this has caused a bit of uproar within the Chelsea fan base. I don't think there's any arguments that Mason Mount doesn't deserve a new contract. Yes, you'll always have those people that have got a Mount agenda and want rid, but the reality of that situation is that isn't going to happen unless Mason Mount does a full 360 and decides that his future is not at Chelsea, which I think is very, very unlikely. Mason Mount is going to be here for the next 5, 6, 7 years, could potentially be here for the rest of his career. So I think people are going to have to get used to the fact that Mount is going to be a big part of the Chelsea future. But in terms of his new contract, you know, it's tricky because it's never an ideal time for contract negotiations. And I guess this is kind of made worse by the fact that, you know, Mount's supposedly demanding £300,000 a week when he's in awful, awful form. He's been terrible this season, which that doesn't help either when you're kind of negotiating a contract. People will view that externally, you know, well, why is he demanding that much money when he's been so bad this season, without kind of looking at the bigger picture. Let's not forget that, you know, Mason Mount is a back-to-back Chelsea Player of the Year. He has, for large parts of the last few seasons, he has carried Chelsea through seasons. He's carried the Chelsea attack at times, and we know he's not really a player that plays in the front three. But let's be perfectly clear, you know, he's not immune to criticism, and he's been awful this season, along with a number of others. And just because he's from the academy doesn't mean that he should be any less immune to criticism. I think the 300k a week scenario is utterly outrageous as far as I'm concerned. We've seen Reece James put pen to paper very quickly on a 250 grand a week deal, and he is one of, if not the best in the world in his position. And he constantly turns up week in, week out and puts in top level performances. And I don't think anyone can argue with Reece James committing his future to the club and, you know, being paid the money that he is being paid. I think becoming Chelsea's highest earning defender ever. So yeah, I think that's fully deserved and rightly so. I think where people are a bit out on Mason Mount is the fact that his performances aren't necessarily justifying this huge amount of money that he potentially wants. He wants a parity with Raheem Sterling, who is on £325,000 a week. And I can understand why Chelsea are paying him that, because of what he's done in the game and because of what, you know, what he's achieved and stuff. And coming from Manchester City, and a player of his profile can command that sort of wage. But for Mount to think that he deserves parity with that, to think he deserves more than Reece James, I think is wrong on his behalf. And Chelsea have got to move away from a model where we're offering players ridiculous wages, and then if it turns out that actually they're not as good as we thought, or they can't rediscover the form that they showed to earn that contract, we are then stuck with a player that potentially isn't good enough for Chelsea, stuck on massive money, and then we cannot get rid of them. So we end up paying these guys hundreds of thousands of pounds a week. It's costing the club millions, and they end up being out on loan for multiple seasons and leaving on a free. We've got to move away from that. I think Boehly's trying to move more towards incentivized contracts. But in terms of Mount, supposedly he turned down before the World Cup a £200,000 a week contract. Now, I don't know how true this is. Reported in the Daily Mail that Mason Mount rejected a new contract of Chelsea worth over £200,000 a week before he left for Qatar. I don't know if that's how true that is. Reece James accepted a £250,000 a week contract and signed quickly. However, Mount is hoping to match Raheem Sterling's £300,000 a week wage. And apparently parties remain a long way apart in negotiations. Now, again, whether that's true or not is a different conversation. But what I would say is that it is perfectly normal to reject the first contract you get offered. That's kind of how negotiations work. You know, very rarely do players or of any contracts do you accept the first version that's offered to you. I think that's not an issue with rejecting the first contract that's been offered, because at the end of the day, you've got to try and get the best deal you possibly can for yourself. And you know, if he thinks he can get more, or he deserves more, then he's not going to accept that contract. So I've got no issue with the contract being rejected, but I think the amount of money he's asking for is very unreasonable. You know, I get that currently he's on what, £75,000 a week, and for us kind of normal people, as it were, that's a ridiculous amount of money. But in footballing terms, for someone that's done what he's done for Chelsea so far in his career, that is a small amount of money. When you've got kind of, let's be honest, bang average players earning a lot more than you are, the likes of Kai Havertz, to name one, then I think Mount's got a right to ask for a lot more money. Personally, I feel that £200,000 a week should be really the limit, or parity of Reece James at an absolute push, but around that sort of 220, 225 a week, I think it is fair. But you've got to put in the performances to earn that. And it's just unfortunate for Mount, because the timings of this stuff coming out is when he's in the worst form possible, and it invites kind of unnecessary hate onto him. You know, you can understand why an agent would always try and ask for more. You can understand why a footballer want to get the most they possibly can. But at the same time, I think, you know, if you love the club, then within reason, you're going to sign for kind of whatever they offer you. I mean, obviously, you know, it's going to be more than he's currently on, but, you know, I don't think you're going to take a club that you love to the cleaners and hold them to ransom until you get what you want. I think they will meet in the middle somewhere. But yeah, Mount, it's an interesting one, because I don't know. He definitely deserves a new contract. I'm not disputing that at all. But the fact that we could end up paying Mount and Sterling a combined £625,000 a week doesn't sit well with me, and it's quite frankly outrageous. That so we've got to find a middle ground. Negotiations will continue, but just on that contract, £200,000 a week, he rejected before the World Cup. Simon Phillips, who is kind of very reliable with reporting Chelsea, who's been great throughout the transfer window, normally gets most things spot on. He was saying that Mount rejecting a new Chelsea contract worth more than £200,000 a week before flying out to the World Cup has been described to him as BS by multiple sources. So make of that what you will. There's obviously some conflicting reports out there. I'm not suggesting that he hasn't turned down a contract, but the accuracy of these reports is kind of to be questioned. Again, there has been reported interest in Mason Mount from the likes of Juventus, from the likes of Liverpool. I personally can't see Mason Mount wanting to leave Chelsea. I don't see why he would. But I think what doesn't help him is the fact that people really overhype him, and then when he doesn't perform, they get on his back massively, and it becomes an easy scapegoat. That doesn't help him. I think that, you know, that just needs to let him play his football. But what also doesn't help him is the fact that, you know, he seems to be an automatic shoe-in to start pretty much every game. And that's not helpful either. You know, he's not in that form where he deserves to be starting every game. And I don't think he's actually a sort of player that should be starting every single week for Chelsea. I think he can do a very good job for Chelsea. But at the end of the day, you know, he's for me, he's not a rotation option as such, but he shouldn't be a guaranteed starter and the first name on the team sheet, because performances don't warrant that. And until he starts to step up and deliver those performances again, then he should be used according to how he's playing. And ultimately, this season, more times than not, he doesn't deserve to be in the starting lineup. And that's the reality of the situation. But yeah, guys, those are just my thoughts on the Mason Mount contract situation. I'm sure once the World Cup's finished, negotiations will continue and he will end up committing his future to the club. But let's just hope we kind of move away from paying players ridiculous amounts of money that they don't really warrant. Hopefully, we can kind of stop doing that. But yeah, those are just my thoughts, guys. As I said, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Smash the likes on the video. Subscribe to Chelsea Fan TV. And I'll catch you again in a video soon. Up the Chels.